Well, happy Father's Day. I like being able to get so many Happy Father's Day. Like I just get to say it to you one time and I get them all back. And so I feel very much ahead of the game right now. And so Dad was trying to teach his 5 children a very important lesson. They were out at a carnival, and in one of the games he had won a prize. And all of them wanted the prize, of course, but he only had the one prize. And so he decides to give them an important lesson. And so he gathers them up and he says, so I only have one prize. Who should get the prize? And of course, me, I should get it, I should get it, I should get it, I should get it. And, and he was like, no. Who is the most obedient here? Who's the most obedient? And they're like, I want to get that one. And they're like, who listens to mom the most? Oh, I don't want to go. Which of you can tell me that you will never talk back to mom and you will do whatever she says? And all the kids finally in unison say, oh, fine, Dad, you get the gift. So your Father's Day lesson for the day, Mom's still right, just listen to her, and you'll be in very good shape. So we are doing this whole series, we call it a marriage and family collection. And we just kind of make these installments every once in a while into this collection of sermons. So in order for us to get started, what I need you to do is I need you to turn to a person that could possibly be a dad and say, Happy Father's Day. Go ahead and turn to them and tell them, Happy Father's Day. They can be behind you. They could be in front of you. Absolutely wonderful. And then now it's also Juneteenth. And so you don't have to look for someone that this would apply to because Juneteenth applies to all of us equally. And so turn to a person around you and just say, Happy Juneteenth. That's coming up this week. And if you haven't had the opportunity to learn about that, what Juneteenth is about, you should do that this week. It's really awesome, actually. It's a highlight as far as a way for us to celebrate. And so, happy Juneteenth. And so now turn to not the person that you came with, because that could start a little bit of trouble. And I don't want to cause any sort of problems here on Father's Day. Turn to someone behind you or in front of you and say to them, I'm sorry, but you're selfish. Go ahead, turn to the person. They need to hear it. I'm sorry, but you're selfish. Now, turn to the person in front of you, also hopefully someone that you did not come here with, and say, I'm sorry, you're selfish too. Go ahead. They need to hear it. I'm telling you, they need to hear it. All right, now you're going to turn to the person next to you, maybe someone that you might have come with or someone that you know, maybe even a friend, and you're going to look them right in the eye, and you're going to tell them, I'm sorry, I'm selfish. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I'm selfish. And I got to tell you, I wish it weren't true. But if I'm being honest with you guys, I'm looking back over my life and I think to myself, the number of times where my selfishness has actually shown up and made my life worse. Man, I couldn't count it in a year's time. There's so many times where the things that I wish I would have done in the world, right? How many lost opportunities are lost in my own selfishness? This is so real. How much of your own heartache or the heartache you've caused other people is because you've been selfish? I wish this weren't true. I wish I wouldn't have to acknowledge that this is just such a very normal experience for us, but I think it is. I think we know it to be true. In fact, here's the real thing. Researchers tell us that I think it's 68% of Americans or something think that Americans are selfish, which is really funny to me that we're almost everybody out there is selfish. We can't say 100% because that would mean us. And so we're it's a really high number, not everyone. And that's actually a true experience, meaning researchers also tell us that we're easier on ourselves and that we actually have a coping mechanism. So if you do something selfish, researchers tell us that when you revisit that selfish moment in your memory, you actually rewrite the memory. That you redo the details, you repackage it, and you resubmit it to your memory so that you are less selfish. This is like straight up research. Can you believe this? Like it's so distasteful to us that we will rewrite our own memories. And so we will put ourselves in a better position, a better light. Do not nudge the person you are next to. Absolutely do not do that. And so like, this is like, and you know, as I've been thinking through, I remember this, all right, so here's proof. All right, I hope you got, anybody a big fan of Wonder Bread, like white bread? Because I grew up with, there was always a loaf of Wonder Bread sitting in my house. And now I don't like it. I can't, it doesn't have any fiber. It's like straight up sugar and plastic mixed in somehow and baked into a loaf. I don't know how they do it, unless it's with peanut butter and jelly. Then I love it every day, no matter what. I will take this loaf home and I will make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich out of it today, and I will still think it is from heaven. But so as we grew up, this is what it is, right? So I don't like the butt ends of the bread, right? I don't know if anybody here is a big fan of the butt ends of the bread. And so this is like, this is as good as sliced bread, right? This is most amazing things in sliced bread. And so when I would go in there and make a sandwich, this would be sitting on the counter, I would go in there and I would reach down past the first couple of pieces of bread, and I would pull out two absolutely beautiful and perfect non-squished bread. Right? Because if I'm going to squish it with my own peanut butter and jelly, I don't want to have the actual bread that was, and I certainly don't want that ugly little butt end. And so I take these, right? And so now you might say, yeah, but the butt ends are there. They protect the loaf. They keep it fresh. You give every excuse you want. But the reality is, if you don't like the butt ends, you leave them till the very, very end. In fact, if there are 4 slices of bread left in the bag at the end, and you are making a sandwich, you grab the 2 good pieces left and you leave the butt ends in there. If you weren't selfish, you would take the butt ends. You would have reached in there and been like, you know what? People don't like the butt ends. I'm going to take them for myself. But you don't. I don't know how else to prove this to you. The Wonder Loaf proves it. And here's the thing, as a dad, if there's 4 slices left, I'm still taking the 2 good ones. My own offspring, I'm like, leave you with the crusty old moldy parts. I'm taking the good stuff, and I will leave it. And then you'll tuck it in, you'll wrap it up. You'll be like, I hope nobody sees what I just did. Because this is just so much of how we are wired. And you get to the Bible, and the Bible is so funny about certain things. And, we realize this selfishness is so much a part of us that when we start talking about family and we realize how intricately woven it is into the created order, we realize actually God created the family in large part to beat selfishness out of us. It's a training ground so that we can actually beat the worst parts of ourselves, that we can actually become better as human beings. And I love that picture. But then you get into the Bible and you come across a verse like this where he says, don't be selfish. Like, there you go. Nice, simple Bible verse for you. You want a memory verse for this week? There you go. Let's repeat it together. Don't be selfish. You didn't need to look at the person you came with and say that. That was for you. You can look at me. Don't be selfish. But this is a memory verse for each and every one of us. Philippians tells us it. Don't be selfish. I love it. It's so straightforward. It's such a piece of cake. Like, here it is. If you just do this one thing, just remember this one thing. Don't be selfish. Now, we're doing this series, this collection that I told you about, marriage and parenting and family, and we make these installments into this series every once in a while, and then we put them up on the website. And so we're going to make a collection, this marriage and family collection, so that the key vital principles of what it means to do marriage and family according to Christ's principles, we'll post them on the website. You can always go back there and revisit them. The last installment that we made was actually Mother's Day. And so you can see the pattern here, Mother's Day, Father's Day, we're making these installments into this series. But what we said then, by way of review, is we asked the question, why did God create marriage and parenting? And here's what you could say to yourself, well, God didn't create it. It's just the way that society evolved, and it's the way that we evolved as a people and stuff. I don't think that's true. I actually think God created it this way. I think he made us interdependent on each other. He made us have these little offspring that would die without us, that would be 100% dependent. I think he designed every part of it for his greater purposes. In fact, what we learn at the very beginning of the Bible is that God His whole plan was to fill the earth with his image. To fill the earth with his image. And in Genesis 1, the very beginning of the Bible, the way he said it is God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. So only together can we fully represent the wholeness of who God is. Only together. You can't do it individually. Men can't do it. Women can't do it. We have to do it together. He designed it. In fact, even the relationship itself is part of how we learn who God is and how we represent him in this world. And I love this equality piece to it. He created them, then God blessed them, and he said, be fruitful and multiply. Now he's literally, this is us having kids. And he's saying, now you're going to get together, you're going to have kids, and we didn't need any further instructions on how to do that. That one we figured out all by ourselves. And so he said, this is how you do it. You're going to go out, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and govern it. God looked over all he had made, and he said it was very good. And so he goes, listen, this was actually the goal. We're going to take the image of God, the imago Dei that is in each person, and I want it to spread over the face of the whole planet. And everywhere it goes, it's a little bit of God's image here on the planet, a little bit of heaven on earth, a little bit of God breaking into this world, taking back land from the enemy, who's the prince of the power of the air. And this is all just a big part. We're going to fill the earth with the image of God. That was his plan from the beginning. And your marriage and parenting are woven into the very first chapter. This isn't a secondary or ancillary part of the created order. It is part of the created order. It is vital. It is important. It's part of what God was trying to do in spreading his image over the whole of the planet. Now, we also saw that wasn't the only thing it was intended to do. And again, this is by way of review in case you missed it. The other thing that we saw is it was to make us more like Jesus. Now, the image of God in us has been tarnished because of the fall, because of rebellion. Now the image of God in us needs to grow into its fullness of what it was meant to be, the fruit of the Spirit, to make us more and more like Jesus. One comedian had said that families are about overcoming emotional torture. And I love that picture. I think that is so true. And I actually think it's right. Like, it's love, overcoming emotional torture. That's another word for sanctification. Like, this is what we're doing. We're becoming more and more like Jesus, and the family is designed to help us do that. In fact, this is kind of one of these crazy ideas you get in the scriptures over and over, but we lose sometimes the power of it. May you always be filled with the fruit of your salvation, the righteous character produced in your life by Jesus Christ. He's saying he wants it to be produced. He wants it to grow in us, this fruit. What's the fruit? Love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, gentleness, and self-control. It's the character of God in us. It's the imago Dei that he wants spread over the face of the planet. When we go and take new parts of the planet, it means that God's love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, gentleness, and self-control is showing up. It means we're doing justice. Justice is rolling down like a river. This is all of the pictures of the prophets telling us that's who you were meant to be. This is your calling. This is your purpose. You're going to bring justice and love and peace and hope to the whole planet. That was my plan from the very beginning, and I'm going to grow that up in you through Christ as this fruit just bubbles up. And we talked about how important it is in marriage and parenting, because if you remember, if you were here, we talked about the idea of the Roach Motel and betrayal, and how what we really need is ballast. We need those Belgian blocks in the bottom of the ship. These are the images that we used back on Mother's Day. And we needed to make those marriages, our marriages, these kinds of things, so they would have the emotional weight so that we could become more and more like Jesus, because your marriage can make you become more like Jesus. And your parenting, I don't know that anything has transformed my life as much as being a dad. I mean, I have had more humbling opportunities and more humiliation than I had ever imagined possible. And it has been good for my soul. It has been good for my ministry. It has been painful, and I have hated it. And it has been good. And so what is that? That's us as followers of Jesus allowing this incubator, the family, to do the work that it was intended to do, to make us more and more like Jesus. But the part that I didn't get to at all when we were talking about it last, why else did he create it? It's because it's going to help us fulfill our kingdom mission. It's actually designed not just to do it, but to propel us to do it. It's a part of how we will do what God designed us to do. Researchers will tell us now that the best marriages and families have a sense of purpose about them. I'm like, I'm glad you guys finally caught up to Genesis chapter 1. It took us thousands of years, but you finally caught up to what the Bible has been saying all along. The best of marriages understand that they have a purpose that goes beyond the marriage, that there's a partnership, there's something that they're doing together. And so in that way, your marriage can become one of the greatest accelerators to your mission, to what God is calling you to do. Your marriage ought to be this great accelerator, but we also know it could be a huge decelerator. It could be a huge decelerator. And we see this so many times, but it's not the way that it ought to be. When we're back in the book of Philippians, it said, above all, you have to live as citizens of heaven, conducting yourselves in a manner worthy of the good news about Christ. Then, whether I come and I see you again or only hear about you, I will know that you are standing together with one spirit and one purpose, fighting together for the faith, which is the good news. This was his charge. Will you stand together? Will you have one purpose? Will you live your mission? And he's calling the whole. This is why we talk about a spiritual family. We're tapping into God's original design for the family, and we're bringing it to apply to all of us as a spiritual family. But that doesn't take it away from the actual physical family. It doesn't diminish that in any way. But we look at these verses and we go, well, that's who we are supposed to be as brothers and sisters in Christ. That's right. And in your marriage, that's your brother or your sister in Christ as well. So how often do we actually apply these things to our own marriages? If this is how we ought to live as followers of Jesus among the spiritual family, how much more so are we supposed to do this in a Christian marriage? We're supposed to have one purpose, the mission that God has given us here on this planet, to do whatever it is that God has called you to do, generally and specifically. That's what you're supposed to be doing in your marriage. You're supposed to be standing together. Does that describe your marriage? You're supposed to be fighting together, not fighting with. Fighting together. Can you hear that? We're supposed to be able to stand side by side, not at each other's throats, draining away the resources that we need for the mission that God has given us. Satan, he's getting in there. He's doing all that work, and he's causing all this division. He's causing all this heartache, and he's pulling us off of the mission because we have nothing left at the end of the day because we're just trying to figure out how to make the marriage work. And God's saying, we can do better than this. We ought to do better than this. See, a great marriage is more important than your happiness. Can you hear that? A great marriage is more important than your happiness. You see, if you think that the reason we're together is just so I could be a little bit happier, so that I could raise these little kids, so that they could become like us, and they can leave us a legacy, or they can take care of us when we're old. If you think that that is the only reason that you have a marriage and that you have kids that you're parenting, that's so sad. It's more than that. It's way bigger than that. We can actually, the goal was to be able to accelerate our mission, our purpose, why we are here as followers of Jesus, to spread his image over the whole of the planet. And our marriages ought to be an accelerator toward that. And so if you're not able to fight for your marriage just because of your marriage, if you're just kind of done, you're kind of put out, you're like, you know what, we're just making it through. And now I just got to, we're like roommates living in the same. That's so sad. We can do better than that. We ought to do better than that. We ought to do it not just for our own sake, but for the sake of the world that needs the followers of Jesus to do what we have been called to do. A great marriage is more important than your happiness. This is so important. Now, if you want to know what it means to have a strong marriage, I'm going to break it down for us super simple. Ready? Here is the secret. A strong marriage is, did you get your pens out? You're going to need pens or your phone. You can take a picture of this. This is the secret to a strong marriage. Are you ready? It's going to blow your mind. You're going to be like, I never saw that coming. Here it is. Are you ready? This is it. I'm about to give you the secret, and you don't seem even nearly. Are you excited to hear the secret of a strong marriage? All right, so here we go. Ready? A strong marriage is measured by, hold on to your seats, how well you pay attention to one another. That's it. Yes, sadly and awesomely, yes. This is what it would take. And I want to break this down as simply as we can. because I want you to be able to walk out of here today and do this. See, your marriage deserves this. The work of the kingdom deserves this. And it is vital for the followers of Jesus to get better at this. How well you pay attention to each other. Remember the selfish verse of Philippians? Here's what he follows it up with. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others. You could say, pay attention to others more than you're paying attention to yourself. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. You mean like pay attention to the interests and the needs of the other people around you. This is what he's saying. You want to know how to not be selfish? You want to know how not to always go grab the best of the bread first for you alone? Think about taking the butt end once in a while. Take an interest in others. How well you pay attention to others is vital. You see, paying attention to others is how we deepen our connections. Right? The enemy, he's the diabolos. He's the splitter. He's the one that divides us. Go right into Genesis chapter 3, 4, 5. Right down from the fall in Genesis 3 all the way through 11, chapter 11. It's one big story of the enemy dividing us. I can assure you, if the enemy is trying to split us, he's trying to divide us, anything working toward connection is a good plan. I can assure you that we ought to be working against what the enemy is doing in our midst. If you are getting pulled away from people, if divisions and wedges are being put into your marriage or into your relationship with your kids or into a relationship with any relationship in your life, I can assure you that God is calling us to greater levels of connection. This is key. And the way that you are going to experience greater levels of connections is vital if you are going to want to have a strong marriage. Here's another way. I'm going to give you a couple different angles that we get to look at this thing to see, hopefully something will resonate and stick and it'll matter for us in the long run. A strong marriage equals the quality of your connections that you make. That's the paying attention piece. It's the quality of the connection. If the person that you are, if this is for your spouse, it's the marriage. If we're talking about a strong relationship, strong parenting, you could fill in all these blanks. I'm particularly talking about marriage today, but this applies in all of your relationships. Then the quality of your connections is going to be the vital piece. How well are you building connections rather than seeing the connections torn down or separated? This is the vital question. You will have a strong marriage if, in fact, you have this strong quality of connection. Here's what's so cool about this. It doesn't actually matter what you are trying to connect over, what you're talking about. So if a couple is having big old fights, it doesn't matter if they fight big, if they fight loud, if they fight quiet. That isn't a good indicator of whether you will have a strong marriage. This is surprising. This blows my mind. Whether or not you're able to be a reflective listener and the things that they have told us so many years, like this is the way you have to do this thing, repeat back what they say and all of that. Couples, many, many happy couples do not know what reflective listening is. There are entire ways that Cheryl and I have related for the 32 years that we have been married, 34 years that we have been together, that you would not think would be particularly good. Like, for instance, Cheryl and I have a very hard time saying, I'm sorry. We're just both too arrogant and proud. And so like saying I'm sorry, I can say I'm sorry to you guys till the cows come. I don't have any problem with that. I don't know why. If I hurt I have said I'm sorry to so many of you because I have hurt so many of your feelings over the years and done things that I'm just used to it. With my wife, you might as well pull out my teeth. And for her, she's even worse about it. Like it's even harder for her. And you'd say, well, how could you possibly have a good marriage? And we figure it out. We find other things, we find other ways, because it's the quality of this connection that is going to be, that you don't have to agree or disagree to have a great marriage. That's not the issue. You can agree, you can disagree, it doesn't really matter. You have to have shared hobbies. It's a good thing sometimes. You have to have shared life experiences. Maybe lots of couples have a better marriage when they spend more time apart. There's no easy, simple rules for all of these different things. And so much of the advice that we've given over the years, research doesn't actually hold up to tell us, yeah, that's actually it. You know what does matter? Whether or not you have this quality of connection, this depth of connection. If both of you feel connected to the other, that's what matters. So what is this bid I'm talking about? A skill in sending and receiving bids, because that's the skill, and it's a developable skill. You can actually get better at that, and that's why this is such a hopeful idea for me, because you can actually develop this skill of sending and receiving bids, and those bids will increase the quality of your connections, which will strengthen all of your relationships. So what is this bid? It's an idea popularized by secular psychologists, especially John Gottman and others, but they're deeply biblical ideas rooted in kindness and some other great principles that you find in the Bible that we'll talk about. But the idea is simple. A bid is a request for attention. It's a request for connection. It's a request for relationship. It's somebody reaching out in some way, often not very clear, sometimes very clear, but often not very clear, where they're looking for a positive connection and wondering whether or not you will give it to them. And it shows up in verbal and nonverbal ways. It shows up very, very confused, shows up sometimes angry. Bids for connection. And your ability to send them and to receive them will determine the level of your connectedness. So Cheryl I'm working from my home office this week. My home office is a desk in our bedroom. Makes it sound a little sitting. So I'm sitting there in my bedroom at the desk, and Cheryl walks in. And so Cheryl and Clover, our dog, so we have two dogs. We have our good dog, Pepper, and then there's Clover. And so Clover, she starts wagging her tail when Cheryl walks in the room. And I see this and this is Clover's bid. Clover is making a bid to Cheryl for attention and affection. So she's got the little tail going, and so Cheryl decides she's going to give a connection moment to our naughty dog. And the way that she's going to do that is she does, I don't know if any of you guys do this, she starts like this. She goes, you ever do this to your dog, to your animal? So you're like, and with every step, the tail goes crazier. Now the whole butt is wagging. And she knows what's about to happen. They're going to get to the moment, and one of them is going to finally jump, and so I see this happening. And so Clover's making a bid, and Cheryl's responding to Clover's bid. So I decide to jump in on the action. And so I jump in, and I'm like, so I start, every time Cheryl takes a step, I'm sneaking up behind Clover. And she doesn't know I'm involved now. She just thinks it's between her and Cheryl. And so every time Cheryl takes a step, I take a step closer to Clover. I take another step, to the point where right before Clover's about to lunge at Cheryl, I can grab her from behind and scare the bejeebies out of her, which is exactly what I did. She lost her mind because she didn't realize someone was sneaking up behind her. And then Cheryl and I had this awesome moment. Cheryl's sending a bid, in a sense. What was going to happen? How was I going to respond? And I responded by engaging in that moment with her, and we had a moment of connection at Clover's expense. Totally worth it. Totally and absolutely worth it. She might not even have seen it as a bid, as a request for connection, but it was. It was a moment. It was an opportunity. And often those moments are marked with humor or with relationship building stuff that's so good and so healthy and so beautiful. And so when we're thinking about bids, I think it's important for us to see that there are only a handful of ways that you get to respond to a bid. Not all of you have seen me draw, so be ready. I am good. I am so good. And so all right, so you get a person here and you get a person over here, and this one has the hair, because we still do that, and so that's Cheryl, we'll say. And so you have a couple, and right now we're not really sure what's about to happen, right? And so one of them makes a bid for the other, and so let's say I go out and I cut the lawn. Actually, in this story, that would have to be Cheryl cutting the lawn. So Cheryl goes out, she cuts the lawn, and don't judge. And she comes in and she says, I just finished the lawn. And I say, it's about time. So she made a bid for connection. And I actually said, I went and turned it against her. I turned it against her. She made a bid, and I weaponized the moment. When you turn a bid against someone, what you're saying is, I don't like you. I disrespect you. I don't want any connection with you. You're not even worth the effort of trying. It's contempt. Most of these, if you have a lot of these responses in your relationship, that relationship is most likely heading for divorce. This will be very, very difficult to maintain any sort of strong, healthy marriage if you are weaponizing and turning bids against another person. It's just the reality. Now, Cheryl comes in and she says to me, I finished the lawn. I just finished cutting the lawn. And we're not sure yet where it's going to go. She said it. It's out there. And I say, you have any plans for making lunch? I mean, she's been out there a while. It's already past lunchtime. I haven't weaponized it. I haven't gone hostile. But what I did was I took this opportunity to turn away from her. The thing is, I might not have done it because I was sad or angry or anything like that. I might have done it because I was just not paying attention, because I was being mindless, because I was being careless with her bid. And you see, this sort of a thing, what happens to her? She gets sad, she gets less likely to offer bids in the future. That's the biggest problem here, is once you guys know, you can imagine what happens. If you start making bids and they're not well received, what happens? What do? How do you become less likely to offer them in the future. You become more guarded. They actually become more shielded, more complex, harder to read. You become a person who's offering them, but with just enough vague intent so that you can protect yourself, because you don't want to be vulnerable and exposed and experience rejection and a lack of connection. You know, Cheryl, I'm convinced she could run a global conglomerate company off of her phone. Like, she is just so good. She's constantly, and most of what she's doing on the phone, I've asked her to do. Like, it's literally work that I have assigned to her. I've said, let's do this thing. Let's connect with that people. Have you reached out to my dad? And her fingers are flying. She's talking into the thing. She's using different apps, right? So she's emailing, texting, but it's Asana and it's other things. It's Planning Center. She's an expert. She's just flying. Even if it's all of the stuff that I have asked her to do, when I walk in the room and she's on the phone when I'm there, I'm like, why are you not talking to me? Oh, on your phone again? Right? Because I'm feeling like she's turning away from me. It's literally the work I've asked her to do. And I feel like, and so what am I going to do next? What's my next response going to be? Usually something a little bit more hostile and less clear is what my intentions are. This is super tricky stuff, because if a guy comes in and he says to his wife, we should schedule a vacation, she doesn't necessarily know what that means. What do you mean? Are you meaning we need to get out of town? Do you mean you want to go see your family? Do you mean it's time to spend some time with the kids? And so she might go down one whole road and start making these plans and really what he is actually saying is, I need time with you. I miss you. But it's not always so clear. It's not always so clear what the bid is. And if a guy's having a hard time being vulnerable and saying, I'm feeling very clingy and needy right now, right? That's a harder thing to say. It's really hard for a man to come up and say, I feel like I just need more of you. And, the kids and the this and the that and the mom-in-law and the whole thing, I just need my wife. That would be, if you're good at being able to say that, say it. That's getting better. It's sending and receiving bids. And if you can't, then can you hear what another person is saying? Or can you ask what another person is saying? Can you look for clarity as to what they're doing rather than simply responding to the words? You see, that isn't a skill. That's not skillfully sending and receiving bids, but you can get more and more skilled. And so, Cheryl, she comes in and she says to me, hey, I just finished cutting the lawn. And after I asked her if she did the edging as well, no, I'm just kidding. I don't do that. I've done that a couple times. But just because I wanted it off, anyway, this is not, I should stop. And so, like, what do I do in that moment? What happens next? And I say, oh my goodness, thank you so much. I'm so glad. I know you were hoping to do that before the party that we had. And was it there? Oh, it looked so good. I mean, I just saw it. I went out there and I saw it. It looked so good. Thank you so much. And we have a moment of connection, which brings her a little bit of joy, and it brings me a little bit of joy, and we build positive relational ballast between us. We develop connection in a way that is important and significant. You see, you can turn against, you can turn away, or you can turn toward each other's bids. And you get to develop this skill. And this is what's so beautiful about it. You really, really do get to develop this. And remember, these can be verbal, they can be nonverbal. You get to work around the quirkiness of your own relationship in order to do that. But if you're paying attention to each other, you can actually do this if you were willing and able to pay attention to each other. So I told you, Cheryl and I can't say we're sorry. We've gotten a little better over the decades, but we're really still not great at it. Now, fortunately, we don't have to say we're sorry as much because love covers a multitude of sins. And we just let a whole lot go now that we might have thought about in the earlier years. If you know, you know. So Cheryl and I now, I remember years ago when we would fight, there was a thing that would happen. So neither of us would give up the bed because this is my bed. Like, you want to leave, you leave. And she would think the same thing. So we would, even if we were arguing, we would still share the same bed. And eventually one of us would try to touch the foot of the other one with a foot. And if we touched and the other one pulled their foot away, we knew it wasn't time. We were like, all right, they're still mad. And so, but eventually if our feet touched and then another foot touched, and then all of a sudden we're snuggling again. And that's it. We just said we're sorry. That was our version of it, and it was done. We would put this thing to rest, whatever it was. And that's often how we would do it. It was a bid for connection, and it was a response to that connection. And you'll figure these things out in ways that you talk it through, you figure it out, you work together, and you do all of this so that no matter how you get to develop this skill, you do it. Because once you start doing this, then you can do what the scriptures have called us to do. Because then and only as you get this thing going, this thing starting to get strong, have emotional, relational sorts of ballast, then and only then can you actually turn and face what God has you to do as your mission. Then it won't be a decelerator. Then ultimately what you'll do is you will stand side by side together. Not fighting here all the time, but instead getting energy from this relationship so that you can do the mission that God has called you to do. We'll talk about what that looks like in another session, another installment of this thing. But this is so unbelievably vital for us to get the kind of strength, to have the kind of a marriage that we need to do the work that God has called us to do. And I can't tell you, man, so this is the verse that has meant so much to so many of us over the years. Instead, be kind to each other, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, just as God, through Christ, has forgiven you. How is it that you can do this? How is it that you can offer repair attempts when they have turned against or turned away? How can you do that? Because if you're going to get here, there's going to be a whole lot of getting over this. How are you going to do that? You're going to be kind. Yeah, but they weren't kind to me. So what? No, that's not right. That's not, I'm just telling you, this is the answer. This is how you will learn to continue to pay attention, and how you will learn to connect with each other is you're going to say, this is what Jesus did for me. I can forgive this relationship is important because this is what Jesus did for me. The 70 times, 7 times that God is he told us to forgive, that's his forgiveness of you. Can you give what Jesus has given you to others? That's what he's calling you to. That's what he's calling each and every one of us to. We can live with this kind of connection because we have been loved and forgiven by God. He has been attentive to us. He has loved us. He has cared for us. He has proven it at the cross. Now he has called us out to go and do this great work that he has for us. Please don't let the enemy cause your marriages, your relationship, your parenting, all of that to pull you away. It is more important than your happiness. Fight for it. Would you pray with me? Lord, we're asking that you would stir up in us here now as we sit, we think about this, we pray, we're going to sing. And Lord, we're gonna go from this place and celebrate Father's Day and just think through all. What I'm asking, Lord, is that you would bring back these ideas again and again and again. That you, Lord, would help us to be attentive to those around us, that we would be able to hear and see the bids that others are sending to us in our marriages, with our kids, with our parents. And that, Lord, we would continually turn toward the other. Our neighbors, strangers, coworkers, Father, everyone is sending out bids for connection. They're sometimes hard for us to see. We want wisdom to see them. They're sometimes difficult for us, Lord, to get through the frustration or the anger that a bid often is cloaked in. These protective measures that we take so that we're not vulnerable. And Lord, give us the wisdom and the kindness to press in, to turn toward, time and again, 12 times a day, 1,000 times a day. May we turn toward each other. May we undo the work of the enemy in this simple act of kindness stemming from what you've done for us, overflowing in our hearts. That's what we want. I pray that you would restore marriages here today, that you would restore relationships between parents and kids, that people would leave here today and call someone that they need to turn toward. I'm praying, Lord, that you would do this and so much more in our midst. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Would you stand?